Good morning. My name is Mustafa Mohammed Boche, and today we are going to look at how we can use Json Web Token to protect our endpoint. So, why is Json Web Token very important, or why does protecting your endpoint very important? Imagine you working on your application, right? And you don't have protected endpoint. That means anyone that has the URL to your application, especially your backend application, can actually hit that particular URL and then consume the resources from that particular URL, right? And you don't want people messing with your application. So one of the things that you want to do is protect your endpoint, right? Whereby only verified or authenticated users can actually access certain resources from a particular endpoint, right? Not all your endpoint definitely would be protected, right? So um, that is what we're actually going to look at, how we can actually secure some endpoints using JSON Web Token. So I'm going to start this afresh. We're going to create everything from start to finish. So you realize that in this particular folder I have this index.html. I'm not going to go deep into it. I've already written some functions, and this is actually going to be available. This is actually going to be for our front end if we decide to use our front end. Obviously we are going to test everything using Thunder Client, right? We are going to test everything using Thunder Client, but I have this already set up just in case we want to test using the browser, right? So that is what that is for. So you realize that I have this app.js and there is nothing in there, so I'm going to start off by doing npm init to initialize our project. And then I don't know, for some reason today my PC is running really slow, so you have to forgive me on that. Yeah, okay, so we have the version, the description, JSON Web Token server basically, right? And the entry point is going to app.js. Let's continue. The author, I'm going to put my name over there. MIT. Good. And we are going to actually install Express, right? We're going to have Express. We're also going to have JSON Web Token, and we're also going to install course, and we're also going to install nodemon, right? Nodemon. So as this is actually installed, and I also don't want to waste much time, so I'm also going to try to set up what we need our server, right? I know my PC is running really slow today, so let me go ahead. So we're going to actually need the HTTP module. So we're going to require that particular module, HTTP. We're also going to need Express, right? We're going to do const app goes to that Express. We're also going to need our course. So let's get our course. Beautiful. Over here, I'm going to set up our server, which is going to go to http.create, you know, create server, and we're going to pass in the app. And down over here, we're actually going to listen on the server at the port, and let's pass a callback. And let's just console log the URL location where the app is actually running. So we're going to have http localhost colon port. Right. Good. Now I'm also going to do app.use because we want to enable our course, so we're gonna have that. And also we want to use accept, sorry, JSON object from the client or whatever. So we're gonna have app express.json, .json. We have that, beautiful. And this is still installing, so whilst it's doing that, I'm also going to go ahead and I'm going to, for instance, create a folder called routes, right? sorry sorry I'm going to create a folder called, what's going on? And inside our route, we are going to have, for instance, one endpoint called, for instance, entry, right? Entry.js. So inside our entry.js, this is just going to be like our entry point. So we're gonna have const router goes to the express router, and I'll quickly export this particular module exports goes to router. And right over here, let's get our router.get request response. We're just going to send a JSON with message, for instance, node server, right? This is all that we are going to send for this. And now it seems our dependencies have been downloaded. So over here, I'm going to create some script. Sorry, I'm going to call this dev, and this is actually going to go for node mon app. And I'm going to have another script called start, and I'll actually go for node app. So I'm going to include our entry point right over here. I'm going to call this app.use. We're going to require that particular entry point. Go to routes, and then go to entry. So if I save this and I hit my Thunder client, I'm going to push this to the end. I'll make a get request, but before I do that, I also have to start my application. So npm run dev. And please forgive me on that. My PC today is running extremely slow. I don't know what's going on. It's running extremely slow. It was not behaving like that in the afternoon, but today I don't know. Like this morning, it's ridiculous, right? So let's send this out there, and we are getting node server. So this means everything that we set up here is working fine, right? So I'm going to create another route, right? And I'm going to call this, for instance, users, right? So there you go. So in this particular users route, we are simply going to do the same thing. So let me just copy this for now. Copy this right over here, and I'm going to paste it here, right? But then let's say, for instance, we have some information from our database, right? So I'm going to call this data, and maybe it's a JSON, right? It's JSON. So let's say we have our ID 1 this goes to, for instance, user 1, right? And then let me copy this a couple of times. Right, so this is going to go to 2. I'm going to have 2 over there, and this is going to go to 3, and we're going to have 3 right over there. So we're going to save this, right? And let's say whenever we hit the user's endpoint, what we actually want to do is send this particular data, right? So I'm going to take this out from there. We are going to send this data. So at the app, we're also going to register it. So this is actually going to go to users, and this will also go to users, right? So if we save this and we hit the users endpoint, we actually get that information, right? So this is working beautifully. So what if, for instance, we want to ensure that before users access this particular resource, they are actually authenticated, right? That is what we are trying to achieve, right? We want to ensure that before a user can access this resource, they are actually authorized to do so. So at our entry point, what we're actually going to do is we are going to create a login kind of like system, right? So over here, I'm going to create a dummy data. I'm going to call it, for instance, DB, and it's going to have, for instance, the username and some information. So username goes to user, and then the password also goes to pass instead of password. And let's say, for instance, I'm going to have one more, and this is actually going to take admin, and the password is also going to be, for instance, admin, right? So we have this, right? So we're going to create another route that is going to be for the post, right? So I'm going to do request response, and right over here what we want to do is we want to get the username and password that the person is sending to our request body. So I'm going to have username, and then, for instance, the password, right? We want to get this particular information. So as we have this information, we also want to check whether we can get that particular user from our database. So we are going to have a const, and let's say find user, and this is actually going to go to the db.find, pass in our item, and I'll get the item, the username that matches our username, right? So now we are going to say if the username, sorry, if the find user is not null, then we may want to proceed and do something, right? Else we want to, for instance, send to the user that there's no account, or there's no such an account with us. So let's say status goes to 400, being a bad request. We'll send our JSON out there, and I will say, for instance, the message is going to be maybe user not found, right? User not found, or user does not have an account, right? So user does not have an account. And what we're also going to check over here is if the user.find.password is equivalent to the password that the person gave us. If that's the same, then that means the user was actually found. Else maybe, excuse me, else we'll send request.status 400, still bad request, and we're going to send our JSON. We're going to have the message be invalid username or password, right? So invalid invalid username or password. So we have this, right? Now let me come right over here. Let's relax. So now if the user is actually found, we want to send, for instance, 200 for the status. I want to send the JSON of, for instance, let's say user found, right? So message, or maybe, yeah, maybe success will be true, something like this, right? So I want to send this out there. So now we're going to go to this endpoint. At this particular endpoint, we'll make a post request. Bear it in mind, this is actually being done in the entry, and the entry endpoint is actually the slash, so that's like the home. So if I make a post request with this user and pass, I'm actually supposed to get true, right? The message true. But if I make the password, for instance, pass1, I get invalid username or password. And if I pass maybe user1, you know, user does not have an account. And this is true because over here, if we check our database, we don't have any user by, we don't have any username that goes by user1. So this makes sense, right? So now what we actually want to do is, instead of just having this right over here, when the user is actually authenticated, we actually want to create our JSON web token, right? So at the top, we're actually going to const JWT. We're going to require, sorry, we're going to require JSON web token like that, right? And right over here, let me first do a very quick Google. So just give me a sec. So we're actually going to Google JSON web token, JSON web token. And we are going to look at, for instance, the various libraries. So I'm going to search for Node, right? And I'm actually interested in the repo. There's this algorithm that I want to grab, all right? So that is why we're going through this. So whenever, like, after requiring our JWT, over here we want to create our token, right? So we're going to have something like const token goes to JWT, and want to sign the and this actually takes a payload. So the payload, we want to put the username and the password, right? And then it's also supposed to take the algorithm that we are using, right? So that is what I want to actually get from here. So let's say we're using this, right? So over here, we are just going to pass that information right over there. And this is actually going to create the token for us, right? So instead of us sending success, we're actually going to send the token. So if I save this and I hit this particular endpoint with the right credentials, we are supposed to get a token. Oh, bad request. What's going on? Error. Okay. Interesting. Well, anyway, let me check and make sure that I'm not doing anything wrong. Yeah, I'm not. Okay, let me try this one more time. I don't know. Okay, this should work. Exactly, this should work. There's something going on with my machine, so please just forgive me on that. So we are getting the token, right? So beautiful. So now what we actually want to do is we want to protect our routes, right? So maybe we want to protect this particular route, right? We want to protect it. So we have to get a function which is going to be our middleware, right? And in that particular, the middleware function is actually going to check on certain things for us. So I'm going to create this folder and I'm going to create a file in there called auth.js, and over here let's do const auth. This is actually going to be a function which takes the request and also response and the next, sorry, and let me export this right away. So I'm going to export that. I'm also going to require my JWT over here. So in here, what we actually want to get is our header, right? We want to get the header to do something. So first things first, let's get the const. We want to get a token from the header, right? We are going to get the request dot headers authorization, right? We want to get this, right? Unless you want to console log that particular information. So let's console log the token. I will come back to this, we'll complete this, but for now let's just do this. So let's go to, for instance, our users, and let's protect. Let me require this. So const auth goes to require auth goes to auth, right? And over here we are going to protect our route with that. So if we come back and, for instance, if I hit users using the get request, this processing, right? So let's wait till it's done. Right, okay, so it seems like something is not working properly. So instead of this, let's console log the request.headers. And what do we have? If I make a request to that particular endpoint, okay, cool. So authorization, there's nothing in there, right? So what we're actually going to do is, this is working as it should. the token is working as it should. Obviously, we didn't send anything for authorization. So for instance, if I go to the auth and I put something in here, maybe this, if I send this, we actually get that, in there. And then you realize that if I console log the token, if I console log the token and I hit this, I get that particular information, right? Beautiful. So now what we actually want to do is, since we want to protect our route, let's go back to auth. Since we want to protect our route, we actually want to get want to split this by the space, and we want to get the second item, because at the end of the day, if you're looking at this, we want to grab this particular information. That's what we want to grab. We don't want to grab this. We don't need it. We just need this. So we are splitting this authorization by the space, which is in the middle here, and we're grabbing this particular information, right? So we'll grab that information, and what we're actually going to do is we're going to say, for instance, jwt dot verify, right? So pass in the token, and we're also passing the algorithm. So over here, realize that we have this SHH whatever. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pass in that particular information, right? And this is actually going to return either an error or decoded information, right? So we're going to have this. So let's remove our nest from there, right? So we'll check if we have error, then we want to send to the user that user is not what authorized. So we're going to have response dot, for instance, status. We're going to make it 400 bad request. We are going to send the JSON which says what unauthorized, or maybe message with, for instance, let's see, have message component. Let's see. Else we just want to move on to the next item on on the list. So right over here, what we're actually doing is we are checking if the token that the person sent can actually be verified. So if it can be verified, we'll move on to the next item, which is to execute this particular function. If not, we'll just send the person, if there's an error, we'll just send the person the error message. So let's try this. So jwt malfunction. So instead of that, we are just going to put the message, for instance, unauthorized request, right? Unauthorized request. Beautiful. So we're going to have this. So if I send this again, we get unauthorized request. So this is working as it's supposed to. So what I'm going to do is we are going to make a post request to users, right? We'll make a post request and I will get the token. I'm actually going to copy the token, this token. I'm going to copy it, and in the authorization, I'm going to paste that token there. So you realize that this token has been posted in the barrier token, So realize that if I go back to the users and I make a get request, we actually get the data, right? We're getting the data because this token can be verified, right? And that is what the JSON web token, that is how you can use it to for instance, protect your routes, right? Realize that if I take this information from there, or I give it wrong information, if I feed it wrong information and I make a request, it says unauthorized user. If I don't put anything over there and I make a request, I still get unauthorized user. But once I put in the token and I make a request, we actually get the data that um, we want, right? So this is one way that you can do to actually protect your routes, right? And actually you can also, for instance, limit the duration, right? So when you are signing in the user, you can actually pass the sparse in. This is another keyword, and for instance, I can say this token expires in 10 seconds, right? So after 10 seconds, I'll be required to sign in again. So let's go back to this particular section, and let's um, get a new token. So let me make a post request. I get this token. So we've been signing, right? We've signed in. Let me get that request. Let me post it here. Let me paste it here, and then let's make a get request to users, right? It says unauthorized user because the time duration that we took to do all this was pretty long. So instead, let me make it, for instance, 20 seconds, right? Let's make it 20 seconds. So if we go back to, for instance, our Tender client, let's make a post request to our endpoint. Let's make a post request. Let's get this information real quick, and let's post it here. Let's make a get request to users. So get request to users. Voila, we are getting this information. But bear it in mind, we've set it that in 20 seconds our token is actually going to expire. So if I make another request, our 20 seconds was passed. So now it says what, unauthorized user, which means we have to sign in again. So if you want to give your token an expiration, you can use the expires in to actually do that. If not, you can just leave it as this, and that'll work fine. That'll work fine. So you realize that now when I'm making request to this, although we have this particular token, this token is expired, it's not valid, so we have to create a new one. So to create a new one, we go back to where we actually log in, which is at this particular endpoint, right? Maybe let me make this, for instance, login, so that you appreciate the difference. So we come to this particular endpoint to make our post request to login, right? And for our login, we're actually sending user and pass, which is actually inside our DB right over here. So we have user and pass, right? So if I make this request, I'm getting this token, right? So if I copy this, and then I want to make a get request to users, you realize if I don't put my token in there at the auth, if I don't put my token in there and I make this request, I get unauthorized user. But once I put my token in there and I make the request, I get the information that we are looking for. So like I said, I have this information right over here, and we want to try it out. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to go to my entry point, and instead of us returning this, for instance, information, we actually want to send the HTML file, right? We want to result to the HTML file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out, and I'm actually going to require, for instance, path. So const path and over here I'm going to do res send file, right? And before I do anything, let me get for instance, let me comment this, and let me comment this out for a minute, and then let me get the location. So let's say const file. We're actually going to get the path, right? So path dot pass. I want to pass this. I want to get the dir. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to console log the file path. I want to make sure that I'm on the right track. So I'm going to make a get request. We're getting this beautiful. So now what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to pass this. I'm going to do path.join, and I'm going to pass the file path, and I'm also going to join it with the public, and I'm going to get the index.html, right? So over here we have this index.html, right, file. So I'm going to get rid of this. I'm also going to get rid of that. We're just going to have this, right? So if we go to our browser and we hit this particular endpoint, we get this, right? So this is a simple interface that I created. So these functions are there and they are working. So you realize that if I hit, for instance, get users, I get unauthorized requests, right? And if I click login, I can log in with username and then the password, and this actually logs us in, right? And when I click, for instance, get users, we get the information right over there. We can actually go back to the users, right? And then maybe we can add something there, maybe 1 2 2 3. So this 2 4 6, and this 3 6 9. If I save this and then we go back and we make our get users again, you realize that the information is successfully updated. And if I log out, it logs out, and when we try again, it says unauthorized user. So this is where I'm going to end my video, and I'm going to actually give you the link to the GitHub repo where you can actually download this, and also obviously go through the front end. So for the front end, it's, let me quickly walk you through. So we have this function for the login, for the logout, and we have this for sending the information to our backend, right? And setting the token inside our local storage right over here. We are setting it inside the local storage, and whenever we want to, for instance, get our users, we get the token from the local storage, and then we'll pass it to the barrier, the authorization, right over here, and we display the information to the user, right? So basically this is how you can actually use the JSON web token to actually, protect your routes, for your resources. I hope this tutorial is useful to you, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye bye.